Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, sisters, friends. Thank you for joining us for Muslim Network TV. Very excited for the program we're about to bring you. But first, I would like to say Eid Mubarak to all of my Muslim brothers and sisters who are celebrating the completion of Ramadan. May Allah accept your fasting, your other acts of worship, and allow all of us to reach the next Ramadan in an excellent state. Today, we are going to highlight some important news that broke during the month of Ramadan. That was the release of CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations' latest civil rights report. Now, full disclosure, many of you may know I'm the National Deputy Director of CAIR, but I did not pick today's segment. Our producers did. I'm just here to ask some questions. To answer the questions, I want to bring on our special guest, Ammar Ansari, who is the Research and Advocacy Coordinator with CAIR. Assalamu alaikum, Ammar.
Walaikum assalam, Edward. Thanks for having me on.
Hamza, good to see you, brother, outside of the workplace. So thank you
Yes.
for joining us to discuss the report. So first, give us the highlight of the report. We'll get into the specific issue of what it showed about schools, but just give us a general, tell us about the civil rights report, what it is meant to entail, how it's put together, what the title of it was this year. Just give us some background on the report for those who don't know.
Absolutely. So the CAIR Civil Rights Report is something that CAIR has been working on since 1995. And between those years, from 1995 to today, every year we're recording the total number of complaints that CAIR would receive both in its national branch as well as its chapters. And since then, we always have seen a steady increase in the total number of complaints that CAIR would receive. Until last year, for the first time, we are seeing a record decline, specifically a 23% decline in the total number of complaints we would receive. With the data that we compiled, we found that we have received 5,156 cases. And this is quite encouraging, but we can't call this a trend yet. Inshallah, as we hope that future years we can see more declines, that is when we can call it a trend.
Okay, so then in total, 23% drop overall. Amar, were there any increases in any of the categories that CARE tracks? And if so, what categories?
Absolutely. One of the increases in the categories that we have seen is education discrimination. So, what is important to note is that in our new civil rights report, we have decided to make new categories. One of those categories being bullying, and the second one being education discrimination. The previous civil rights report was always compiled to include those two new categories that we have now. When we look at the numbers, we do see a 63% increase. In bullying, we see 188 cases in terms of bullying. And for education discrimination, that could be things such as Islamophobic content being shown in the classrooms, we see 171. Now, in total, we see that there's 289 cases. And when we look at the data from 2021 to 2022, that constitutes the 63% increase.
Interesting. What were some of the examples of school complaints that you received?
Absolutely, yeah. One of the complaints that we receive, and we highlight this in the special section of the report, is an incident in Massachusetts. So, for example, there was a prominent charter school that cited a dress code violation for a Muslim student who was wearing a hijab. Now, the thing that is so concerning about this is that when you look at the note, which we talk about in our civil rights report, they wrote it out as jihad. So, CARE Massachusetts was able to advocate for the student, and the student was able to go back and wear the hijab. But it didn't stop there. It asked the charter school to change its dress code policy to accommodate those needs, as well as we saw wonderful progress in the Massachusetts state legislature, in which they put into their anti discrimination laws to include hairstyles. So, this is wonderful progress that we've seen in the cases of education discrimination in our new civil rights report.
What about the issue of school bullying, Amar? What sort of complaints about that, and is that a major portion of the complaints that are coming in?
Absolutely. As I said with the 118 number, um, bullying constitutes a lot of what we see in an educational context. And it's really unfortunate when you hear stories coming from all over California of students being bullied for how they're perceived of being Muslim or asking for religious accommodations. And as we see a return to in person instruction after being online due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are seeing those numbers once again to rise. So it's quite concerning that when the work that we do here at CARE, we get those calls of students reaching out asking for our help because of the bullying incidences that they face at school.
And Ammar, is it true? Another one of the issues that's come up is religious accommodation. So getting time off to go to attend Eid prayer, time off for a few brief minutes to pray, even the right to opt out of reading or discussing, curriculum content that's related to issues of sexuality that many Muslims might find objectionable. Are those also some of the issues that are coming up?
The issues that we receive about religious accommodations do vary from a number of issues. And the most common one we do see is Jummah accommodations. Jummah accommodations in which students want to take 30 minutes out of their time, for example, to congregate in the school or to go to a local masjid in which they could pray for Jummah. Sometimes we see those cases being denied, and a lot of the work that we do at CAIR is to advocate for those students to pray Jummah in a very safe and comfortable manner, something to accommodate this obligation that all Muslims follow across the world.
So, what are some of the recommendations from the report? And not only to address this issue, but any other issues that you thought were critical to address?
Yeah, one of the things we are seeing is student athletes, actually, and it's something that we do highlight in our report. So, a lot of the discrimination that we can see in educational settings includes students who want to participate, but they, for example, wear the hijab, but they're not allowed to participate because the school can claim it's a dress code violation. An example I brought up earlier in Massachusetts. So, we see, for example, in Maryland and Ohio, wonderful, wonderful progress in which those state legislators allowed student athletes to wear religious sports attire as they compete. I do want to call attention to one of the activists, a student activist who brought this issue up in Ohio. Her name was Noura Abu Karam, and she wanted to participate in her high school track meet, but was not allowed to, again, because of the dress code violation that was put on her for wearing the hijab. When she brought this case up on a state level, Ohio did the wonderful thing of passing this legislation to allow such a case.
Alhamdulillah. So, in other words, there are challenges, but also some progress, some ways to address some of the problems that
Progress.
that you're identifying in these reports. Excellent. Well,
Yes.
Ammar, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing some of this information with us. Thank you for your work on the report. I will now put my CAIR hat on and say we're very grateful to have you working on these things. And I want to thank you on behalf of Muslim Network TV for being with us today. And we look forward to having you on in the future to discuss more about the other content in this report related to other issues that you all are studying. In the meantime, thank you so much, Ammar.
Thank you for having me on, Edward.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time, inshallah.